Hello, Pete. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Great to see you. So I would like to talk for a moment, if I may, about how MapSwipe came about and why it's so important. So, I mean, you all know the story of missing maps. Pete tells that story. Um, but let me talk about why MapSwipe is actually such an important piece of the puzzle. So, really, what we're looking for here is a continental scale task. Missing maps has actually undertaken, the task of getting hundreds of millions of people who've never been on the map before on the map. And that's an extraordinarily, it's a big thing. And we've got the OpenStreetMap community and the humanitarian OpenStreetMap community who are on the case. But really, in order to get this done, we need another sort of 10x, 100x ability to scale what we're doing. And one of the biggest things that is difficult to scale is scrolling through endless areas of bush. Now, we first noticed when we were doing a task for South Sudan, it's very, very important for a field team. And I spend a lot of time in the field struggling with this problem. If you don't know where the people are, it's extremely hard to manage your public health intervention. I mean, if you're doing a vaccination, if you're doing nutrition, if you're doing any of these things where you kind of need to know what the population is and where the population is and how many people there are and where they are. If you're doing epidemic management and you're trying to figure out where the transmission of the disease is happening, if you don't know where the population centers are, it's extraordinarily difficult to do your planning. Now, MSF's mandate is to save lives, alleviate suffering, and restore dignity. And another thing that this does when we put people on the map who've never been on the map is it's, in a sense, it's a way of restoring dignity. Now, when we were doing this job in South Sudan, we were trying to figure out where the population was so that a nutritional assessment could get there and effectively find the people so that we could assess their nutritional status. And we realized none of these people had ever been on the map before. In fact, these people will live their entire lives and die without anyone knowing their names other than their families and their neighbors. And we were the first people, as we were scrolling through this map, looking for their homes. We still don't know their names, but at least we know where they live. We actually were the first people in the history of the world to take a sufficient interest in these villagers in the middle of nowhere in South Sudan to even know where their house was. In a sense, that's a restoration of human dignity, to at least care enough about the existence of these people to know where their house is, to put them on the map. And putting someone on the map is an act of more than just sort of pragmatism. It's also an act of recognition of someone's humanity, or dare I say it, even a restoration of dignity. So as we're looking at the sort of inefficiency of using the normal mapping tools, which are very good for actually creating map features for putting houses on the map or for tracing roads, but they weren't very good for actually looking through endless square kilometers of bush. And in this case, you're looking for little round brown houses in a brown landscape surrounded by round brown trees and round brown rocks. It's actually tremendously difficult to know what you've already seen, to really systematize, making sure that you haven't missed anything. And that was the genesis of MapSwipe. And of course, Benny Herford, who figured out how to do this with Pybosa, with a tool using just a laptop to sort of systematize which little bit of bush you were looking at. We wanted to take that just a little bit further and put it on a mobile device. And at the time, I was doing my commute in London, and well, geez, where is there more sort of dead time or available labor than in the two where everyone's playing Candy Crush? So we got Pim DeWitt involved, and Pim being an extraordinary, gaming company owner and a guy who's great at building things that people love. And he's also an extraordinary humanitarian. This is a young man who's already given enormous amounts to the humanitarian community. And Pim actually agreed to do this job for an extraordinarily low rate. I mean, I work in the tech industry now, and I can tell you that it's extraordinary what Pim has given to us, the amount of capacity and competence that he's brought to this for a very low price. So Pim actually built this thing with the idea that we would make something that was as nice as a game. And that's, the idea is then to build something that really is going to allow not just a sort of doubling of our speed and our capacity to cover territory, but a 10 times greater or 100 times greater increase in our ability to get volunteers to really engage with this. And I'm sure Vicky's, has already talked about how important it is for MSF to have volunteers engaged with us. And I remember, years and years being asked by people who knew what I did with MSF saying, how can I help? And me not really having much of an answer. But now we really do. And so MapSwipe, though it's in its infancy right now, and I hope nobody thinks that this is as far as we're going to go with it. MapSwipe is such a great answer for people who can't spend years of their lives going out to the field and don't have the money to give enormous amounts of donations to humanitarian work, but are able to give some of their time and their expertise. Well, what a great thing to have MapSwipe so that we can do that for people. People can engage with our mission. And I think this is only the beginning. The capacity to have people do this kind of humanitarian work from a mobile device, I can already imagine. I mean, we've classified these tiles. What you're doing right now is you're just looking through little bits of imagery and telling us whether or not there's something in it. But it's not that much of a stretch to imagine that once you've found a house, you can actually tap on that house and have machine learning tools similar to the sort of Photoshop magic wand tool draw a square around that house based on the color of the house based against the background, and even some machine learning to sort of tell what shape the house ought to be so that you get a good guess. And then the user just has to validate it. So imagine you swipe your tile, you click to say there's something there. Next task that comes along, you've actually got that tile and you tick, tick, tick all the houses, and it draws a little rectangle where it thinks the houses, and you just kind of validate that. Or a road, you just kind of swipe along it, and that actually gives you a really high definition, really accurate trace of that road, and we can stitch that together later and then classify which kinds of roads those are to sew together all those little tiny lines. Now, if only, of course, there was an application to classify things like roads. Ah, yes. So imagine that actually after we've done this kind of mapping, we can use that same interface that Pim has created with his team, with Alison and Sadok and Heather and all, that we can actually, once we've done mapping, use the same MapSwipe interface to classify roads, for example, or classify houses into this type or that type of house. So the use case for this is only beginning. So please forgive any bugs which are in it and any sort of awkwardness in the application right now. We're just getting started, and all of you who are playing with it at this time and starting to contribute at this time, you're not just part of actually classifying some terrain for us and classifying some imagery to see where there's features in it. You're also participating in creating something which I'm absolutely convinced is going to change the way we do humanitarian mapping and humanitarian response. In the end, that's what it boils down to, is how do we do humanitarian response? And this is going to help us put hundreds of millions of people who've never been on the map before on the map. And I don't want to make this grandiose claim that mapping is going to change everything, but it's going to change the way we do humanitarian response. And in the end, that fundamental restoration of dignity, where people who were before just not present in the digital world and not present in any database and in some way just ignored, we're changing that. One swipe, one tap at a time. So thank you, everyone. This is awesome. I can't wait to see the next chapter and be part of the next chapter. Okay, bye-bye.